7 motorcycles that secretly cost way more to maintain than most riders expect. I'm not talking about the obvious stuff: insurance, tires, fuel. I mean the cost nobody really warns you about at the dealership. The ones that show up 6 months later at the first major service, or the first time something small goes wrong. Some of these bikes look like incredible value on paper. Some of them are genuinely unforgettable to ride. But there's a side of ownership the spec sheet never talks about. And a lot of riders only discover it after they've already signed the papers. Let's start with the one that catches people off guard the most. Ducati Streetfighter V4. This thing looks absolutely insane. And honestly, it feels insane from the saddle too. The power delivery is violent in the best way possible. The electronics are seriously impressive. And for the first few months, many owners feel like they bought the greatest motorcycle on earth. Then reality slowly creeps in. Ducati's desmodromic valve system is one of the brand's most iconic engineering choices. It's also one of the most expensive maintenance systems on any modern production bike. The valve service interval on the V4 lands around every 15,000 kilometers. That sounds manageable until you see the labor bill. In the real world, owners regularly report paying anywhere from $1,500 to well over $3,000 for a single valve service, depending on where they live, which dealer they use, and whether the mechanic finds anything unexpected. And surprisingly often, they do. Then there's the heat. This bike runs hot, really hot. Sitting in traffic on a warm afternoon, the engine heat starts pouring onto your legs and lower torso fast enough that riders genuinely complain about it after even short commutes. Not a little warm, more like someone left an oven door cracked open beside your knees. For quick weekend rides, some people tolerate it easily. But as a daily commuter or long-distance machine, that heat slowly wears you down. And consumables add up faster than many buyers expect. Brake pads disappear quickly if you ride the bike hard. And the tires this thing really wants aren't remotely cheap. Over a full year, the ownership cost usually climbs way past what newer Ducati buyers imagined. To be fair, some owners absolutely adore the bike and never regret a dollar. They knew exactly what they were getting into. But there are also riders who walked into the showroom thinking they were mainly buying horsepower and style. Then the first major service bill lands, and suddenly the relationship feels very different. Yamaha R1M. The M brings all the expensive toys. Magnesium wheels, Öhlins electronic suspension, carbon fiber bodywork that makes the bike look like it escaped a MotoGP pit lane. It also brings a level of ownership complexity a lot of riders underestimate. The R1M is one of the most sophisticated production motorcycles ever built. But every layer of sophistication eventually costs money. The electronic Öhlins suspension is incredible when everything works properly. But once servicing or repairs enter the conversation, you can't just roll into any local shop. You need someone who actually understands that system. And the carbon bodywork looks stunning right up until the bike tips over at walking speed in a parking lot. The kind of stupid little accident almost every rider experiences eventually. That's when the repair quotes start becoming painful. Some owners have said replacing a single damaged carbon panel cost more than a full fairing kit on a standard superbike. And hearing numbers like that after a low-speed drop genuinely hurts. Then there's the part people don't fully realize during test rides. The R1M is built around track riding. Everything about it reminds you of that after about 45 minutes on public roads. The riding position loads pressure into your wrists surprisingly quickly. The seat is thin and firm. And after an hour or so, riders who aren't used to aggressive supersports usually start shifting around constantly, trying to relieve pressure from their lower back and hips. It's not uncomfortable because Yamaha made a mistake. It's uncomfortable because comfort was never the mission. The bike exists for lap times, and it's phenomenal at that. But some buyers mistake high-tech for practical. The R1M really isn't practical. It's a specialized machine pretending to have license plates. Kawasaki Ninja H2SX. This one feels different because, on paper, it's supposed to be the sensible option here. Supercharged engine. Sport touring ergonomics. A bike designed for real-world distance riding. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it delivers. But the Supercharger changes everything about ownership. That system spins at absurd speeds and comes with maintenance demands most naturally aspirated bikes simply don't have. Oil requirements become more particular. Servicing becomes more specialized, and labor costs climb accordingly. Parts availability can also become frustrating depending on where you live. If your nearest Kawasaki dealer isn't experienced with H2 models, even relatively small issues can turn into long waits. A lot of riders also underestimate how thirsty this bike gets once you start enjoying the boost properly. Cruising gently, it's manageable. But the second you start using that supercharged power the way the bike encourages you to, the fuel gauge starts dropping faster than many touring riders expect. That catches people off guard because the bike wears sport touring clothes. But underneath, it still has a very serious appetite. The next bike hides its cost differently. Most owners don't fully feel it until the second year. Aprilia Tuono V4. There's a reason this bike has such a loyal following. The engine sounds incredible, the chassis feels alive, and the riding experience has a personality that a lot of modern motorcycles honestly struggle to match. But ownership can become complicated faster than people expect. Aprilia parts aren't cheap, and in a lot of places, they're not quick to get either. If something specific fails, and eventually something usually does, owners sometimes end up waiting weeks for parts that Japanese bikes would have back on the road in days. For riders in shorter riding season climates, that gets frustrating fast. Nobody wants half their summer spent waiting for shipping updates. The V4 engine also demands attention. Valve checks, fluids, torque specs. This isn't a bike that rewards neglect. And the ergonomics slowly become part of the conversation too. At first, the riding position feels sporty and exciting. But somewhere around the second hour on the highway, many riders start noticing pressure building in their wrists and shoulders. Older riders, especially, tend to mention this after longer trips. Not because they can't handle the bike, plenty absolutely can, but because the Tuono gives you less forgiveness physically than something designed with comfort higher on the priority list. Some owners stay completely obsessed with it. Others slowly start riding it less often without fully realizing why. Then eventually the bike ends up for sale. Suzuki G6 S1000 GT. Honestly, this one almost feels unfair to include. Compared to the Italian bikes here, the Suzuki is still relatively affordable to own. It's reliable, quick, and far less dramatic overall. But there are hidden costs people don't think about before buying it. The engine comes from the G6, our 1000 lineage, and while that gives the bike real character, it also brings vibration traits that become noticeable on long highway rides. Not immediately, usually after a few hours. There's a certain buzz through the bars and foot pegs at cruising speed that slowly drains energy out of you. It's difficult to explain until you've experienced it yourself. Nothing hurts. You just arrive feeling oddly tired for the distance you covered. Then there's the electronics package. Compared to rivals from Honda, BMW, or Yamaha, the Suzuki starts feeling slightly behind once you live with it for a while. The TFT works fine, but doesn't feel especially premium. The suspension setup lacks the sophistication some competitors offer. Connectivity features feel basic. None of this ruins the motorcycle. But a lot of owners eventually start upgrading things, try and close the gap. Better windscreen, improved seat, suspension tweaks, comfort accessories, and suddenly the budget-friendly option quietly stops being budget-friendly. Indian FTR-X are carbon. This bike surprises people for a completely different reason. The FTR platform has real charisma. The styling stands out instantly. The engine has tons of punch down low, and around town the bike feels playful in a way many modern machines don't. Then you spend a full day with it. The carbon components look amazing, but replacing them is expensive, and repairing them properly usually means finding a specialist. Indian's dealer network is also still thinner than the big Japanese brands in many areas. If you don't live near a strong dealer, even routine service starts becoming inconvenient. But the bigger issue is expectation. A lot of buyers see the premium spec sheet and flat track styling and imagine a versatile, everyday machine. What they actually bought is a very specific motorcycle with very specific strengths. Long-distance comfort is not one of them. After about 90 minutes, many riders start shifting around constantly, trying to relieve pressure from their hips and lower back. The seat concentrates weight into a pretty small area, and riders with existing back sensitivity usually notice it quickly. The upright position helps for a while, but eventually the bike reminds you what it was really designed to be. Some owners understand that immediately and love it for exactly what it is. Others spend months trying to turn it into something more practical. That's usually where disappointment starts creeping in. What surprises many riders about the last bike is how long it takes before the ownership reality fully hits. MV Agusta Rush 1000. There may not be another motorcycle on this list that creates stronger reactions. And honestly, both sides make sense. The Rush 1000 is visually unbelievable. Standing next to it in person almost feels surreal. It doesn't look like transportation. It looks like somebody built a concept bike and accidentally approved it for production. Then the ownership questions start. MV Agusta's reputation around reliability and part support has improved over the years, but the concerns never disappeared completely. Rush 1000 owners are part of a very small community, and that creates problems once something needs attention. A lot of independent shops simply don't want to work on MV Augustas. Authorized service centers can be extremely far apart depending on your location, and parts delays measured in weeks are still very real. Over time, this creates a weird kind of anxiety in ownership. Not excitement, not adrenaline, more the background stress of wondering what happens next time something breaks. And physically, the bike asks a lot from the rider too. The seating position is aggressive enough that shorter rides feel thrilling, but longer days become work. Wrists, lower back, hip flexors. Riders past their 40s especially tend to mention feeling worn down much faster than expected. Then there's the heat. Like many high-performance Italian machines, the Rush throws serious engine heat into the rider during stop-and-go traffic. On hot days, after enough red lights, the discomfort becomes impossible to ignore. To be fair, some owners genuinely love every single part of this experience. They treat the bike like an exotic machine, accept all the compromises, and see the maintenance as part of the relationship. For them, it's worth it. But emotional buyers sometimes enter ownership expecting the fantasy version instead of the real one. And somewhere around a year or two later, reality starts catching up. The service costs are real. The waiting times are real. The physical demands are real. And selling a motorcycle this exclusive can take much longer than people expect. Here's what connects all 7 of these bikes. None of them are bad motorcycles. Not even close. Every single one does something special. The real problem is usually the gap between expectation and reality. Showrooms are excellent at selling excitement. They're much less interested in explaining what ownership feels like after a massive service bill, or after waiting 6 weeks for a part, or after realizing your body doesn't enjoy aggressive ergonomics the way it did 15 years ago. The riders who tend to enjoy high-maintenance bikes the most are the ones who went in fully informed. They budget honestly. They ask uncomfortable questions. They understand that a motorcycle can be brilliant to ride and still difficult to live with. Those are 2 completely different things. And for a lot of riders, that distinction matters more than horsepower ever will. If any of these bikes are currently on your short list, the smartest thing you can do isn't buying accessories or watching another promotional review. It's talking to someone who's actually owned the bike for a couple of years. Ask about the last major service. Ask about parts delays. Ask what annoyed them 6 months later that nobody mentioned during the test ride. Those answers usually tell you far more than the brochure ever will.